Alright, so boom, the year is 2016. The previous collective bargaining agreement, essentially the terms that the players, the governors, and the league come to in sharing the revenue from the NBA, is about to come to a close after like 5 years or so. The NBA is working closely, it's very closely, on coming up with a deal that would satisfy both the owners and the players, especially taking into consideration the very blatant and very sudden spike in NBA revenue thanks to the 9-year television deal recently signed by the NBA. In addition to that, there's the sudden phenomenon of players leaving smaller markets, LeBron, Kevin Durant, in order to apply themselves in bigger, better markets. So all parties at play here have some serious work to do. The owners are trying to get as large a share as possible of that new revenue, and the players are trying to get in on that sweet green as well. So this leads to the invention of the Supermax contract, which basically gives the home teams that have a superstar type player superior financial advantage over their competitors in trying to retain that player. In other words, they're able to pay them more money quicker than anyone else, which have had cases that have been successful, but others not so much. This was the staple of the 2017 Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA for short, which reflected the emerging waves of player empowerments that were already beginning to take place in the league at the time. Players wanted more money and more freedom, and the NBA not only had to respond to those demands, but also react to them as well. So here the Players Association, the conglomerate that basically represents all the players in the league, was at a head. They were currently holding the advantage of both the owners of the teams and of the league. And this allowed the ones that were leading the Players Association at the time that same advantage, which allowed for President and Vice President Chris Paul and LeBron James to stroll in with some suggestions that have brought them tens of millions of dollars, money that they themselves finessed from the league. What's up, y'all? I'm Kip Kama 11, and you can't hate the hustle. What Chris Paul set up back in 2016 was nothing short of masterful, and right now he's living undoubtedly in his best case scenario, all according to plan. So in the CBA, there's a somewhat obscure clause that prevents older players from signing long contracts. This was first known as the over 35 rule, which was basically designed to prevent teams from signing older players to long contracts, of which they didn't fully fulfill. By that I mean that they retire before the contract is ended. For example, you could take Magic Johnson. Let's say that he wanted $30 million in total, okay? Now, the Lakers, hypothetically of course, couldn't give him $10 million over 3 years. So they come up with another solution. Instead of giving him 3 years for $10 million a year, they give him a 6-year contract worth $5 million a year for 6 years. Now, they don't expect him to play much longer than 35 years of age, so they're okay with him retiring and them paying him for the last 2 seasons while he's still retired. This was a loophole that the NBA wanted to close up, so they went ahead and established the over 35 rule, which basically said that if a long-term contract expires after a certain age, it is null and void. At first, it was over 35 years of age, and it became known as the over 35 rule, which basically messed up older players who wanted security with a certain team. Now, President Chris Paul of the Players Association and Vice President LeBron James advocated for the over 36 rule to be changed to over 38, bumping up the age limit to over 38 as opposed to over 36. And as you could imagine, this allowed for more flexibility for older players to sign long-term contracts. Now, the only known example of this rule being violated after that change was when the Houston Rockets tried to sign Nene for 4 years, using just a limited amount of money. Because Nene was going to turn 38 before the start of the 4th year of his contract, the contract was basically null and void, and the Rockets had to find some other option, of which they just paid him for 3 years as opposed to 4. Now, this ended up being a good thing for the Rockets because they ended up paying him a 4th season the minimum salary, which was better than the 3.6 that they were planning to pay him, which of course is sort of messed up on Nene's part. He just lost out $2 million because of this rule. Now, Chris and LeBron didn't want something like this to happen to them. Of course, definitely Chris, where they're paid less money because they weren't able to secure a long-term contract beforehand. They were both older players, and there were questions in the air that they might be declining. And in the 2018 offseason, it would get to the point where it actually did affect them. So, I mean, they did what they had to do. They pushed it up 2 years, and the rest is history. Because of this change from over 36 to over 38, Chris Paul was now able to sign a 5-year deal with the Clippers for $201 million. 1 year and $40 million more than it would have been if it would have just stayed over 36. LeBron was able to sign a 4-year deal with the Lakers despite being 34 years of age, and also while not having bird rights, which is another thing we'll explain it probably later. Then of course came Chris Paul's deal with Houston, where he signed with them for 4 years and $160 million, and subsequently became judged for being one of the worst contracts in NBA history. And of course things didn't really scratch out that way, but that is really what it seemed at the time. Because of this age limit change from 36 to 38, Chris Paul was able to sign for 4 years as opposed to 3 and getting $150 million, which is still cool, but that might have changed everything. So for the first year of the new contract, he plays for Houston, then he's traded to Oklahoma City. At that point, he had 2 years left on his contract after he finished with Oklahoma City Thunder, which may have given teams more incentive to trade for Chris Paul, since he was just going to be an expiring contract and they would have been able to renegotiate after the next season. So maybe he doesn't go to the Suns, maybe he goes to some other building team with a lot of assets, and he doesn't make it to the NBA Finals. Now, thankfully for him, that didn't happen. He went to Phoenix and almost made a championship, and then was able to renegotiate his deal for another 4 years and $120 million. Now, this is where the real finesse comes out here. Now, of course, there's another parallel scenario out there where Chris Paul ends up playing horrible, or he's on a bad team and they don't even make the playoffs. At that point, he still had his 4th extra year that he could opt in and still get his bag, even though he's not on a good team. Now, of course, we know that didn't happen, but Chris Paul still got his bag regardless. Because under the restrictions of the old over 36 rule, Chris Paul could have only signed a max contract to up to 3 years, and at that point he would be 39 years of age. Now, Chris Paul has been balling, but I don't know if a 38 to 39 year version of him would be commanding $30 million a year. So the fact that he was able to get that security right now, right away, no matter what happens later on in his career, he might get injured, the Suns might blow it up, whatever happens, he still has his extra 120 mil, of which he made 30 extra M's because of his dealing with the CBA. And LeBron benefits indirectly as well. When he signed his 2-year $85 million extension with the Los Angeles Lakers, he would have not been able to do that under the previous contract. He would have only been able to re-sign for 1 year. Now, of course, this is LeBron James that we're talking about, but he is getting older. He's been injured in the past years. We've seen it. And it doesn't really matter who it is. Paying a 37-year-old player $44 million is not really seen that lucrative. Of course, this is LeBron that we're talking about, and he's top 2, top 3 GOAT in all time, so you could do what you want with him. But the fact that LeBron James was able to get his security in December of 2020, as opposed to worrying about it later on, playing quote-unquote for a contract, I know that sounds weird, it's LeBron, really shows you the genius of this move by both of these guys and the guys behind them. They're bag getters. They know how to get to their bag. He did it again. Chris Paul has finessed the bag. He's making almost $500 million, $500 million, excuse me, throughout his entire NBA career. But yeah, when I saw that 4 years, $120 million, I was like, yup. Congratulations, Chris Paul. You got to the bag once again. Man, I'm guessing those are the perks that come with being the Players Association president. Enjoy your bag. But with all that out the way, hope y'all have a great day or night, and I'll see y'all later. Thanks for watching.